Every moment the world and the entire universe is remaking itself, and so are you. Perpetual transformation is the name of the game. Nothing remains the same for the slightest nanosecond. Nothing's permanent, everything's in flux. Remember that old saying, no one ever steps in the same river twice. Why? Because it's not the same person, and it's not the same river. Throughout its history, humanity has been beset by problems, conflicts, wars, famines, plagues, and natural disasters. Today's issues seem particularly acute. Could we be at some kind of turning point? Top of the agenda are armed conflict, climate and environmental concerns, pollution, poverty, and mass migrations. Many institutions are crumbling. Corrupt politicians funded by scheming elites pursue what seem to be criminal agendas. There seem to be moves to ensnare humanity via technology, social manipulation, and other sinister means. And yet, there's an even greater problem facing us, and it's a question of identity. Not a sexual, a political, a national, or a cultural identity, something much deeper than that. The truth is that we simply don't know who we are. We're mainly unaware that our primary identity is a spiritual and not a physical one. And yet, most of our beliefs and our perceptions are almost exclusively shaped by the materialistic mindset. The materialistic way of thinking insists that the physical world is the only reality. And so we construct mistaken myths about who we really are. Materialism has hijacked science and turned it into a new religion of scientism, whose apparent wisdom is unquestionable. And yet, like everything else, science is a work in progress and doesn't have all the answers. Science also tends to be cold and logical, denying all notions of soul or spirit. It can't even define consciousness other than as a byproduct of electrochemical activity in the brain. So this is why increasing numbers of people are beginning to see materialism as a failed world view. Throughout the annals of time, the wise ones, the sages, the adepts, and the philosophers have insisted that the physical world isn't the only reality, and maybe not even the most important one. Even science now agrees that 95% of the universe is invisible and describes it as dark energy or dark matter. For a great many people, the universe is merely a giant, ancient, cosmic accident. It's a clockwork machine without plan, purpose, or destiny. For others, the cosmos was merely created by the hand of God. I suggest that both these views could be inaccurate. The message I'm trying to convey is that human beings don't appreciate that they're far more than flesh, blood, bone, connective tissue, and brain. Although many accept the idea of a soul or spirit, few fully realize that they're primarily spiritual beings occupying physical bodies. They're not physical bodies with spirits and souls attached as an aftermarket accessory. This is a very difficult idea for many to grasp. There's a series of timeless truths known by a few people since early human history. These truths are derived from cosmic laws which govern us and everything else in the universe. These are unalterable, universal principles. This is what's known as esoteric wisdom. Esoteric simply means secret. Sometimes it's called occult science. Occult merely means hidden. This wisdom has always been with us, preserved in secret. During certain eras, this ageless wisdom, or perennial philosophy, appears to vanish, but it's always privately preserved by a group of advanced beings, until it's time for these truths to emerge or re-emerge. So what exactly are these timeless truths? Some of them contradict some religious views, and many of them contradict the certainties of modern science. Most importantly, this wisdom tells us that the universe isn't so much a giant place as a mighty thought. The cosmos is consciousness. It's infinite and eternal, without beginning or end, without boundaries or limitations. Everything in that universe is conscious at its own level. Yes, it may surprise you to know that even rocks have primitive consciousness. These timeless truths inform us that everything is alive and interconnected. There's no dead matter or empty space. The universe is teeming with life, seen and unseen. In fact, there's nothing but life. And since all that life is interconnected, there's only one life, and we're all part of it. This ancient knowledge tells us that the material world isn't the only reality. It's just one of other realms and dimensions invisible to our everyday senses. There are also mysterious energies and hidden forces which preserve and renew everything. There are concealed kingdoms of nature, above and below the human, without which we wouldn't have been born and without which we couldn't survive. The purpose of life everywhere is to develop into something higher via endless cycles of evolution. These cosmic truths inform us that physical death is intimately connected with all cycles, but that life continues and we're reborn in new bodies many times as we continue to evolve. One day, far, far into the future, human beings will no longer need physical bodies and therefore will no longer die physically any longer. Things aren't always what they seem. The material world seems very solid and permanent to us, doesn't it? But nothing could be further from the truth. So, seeing is believing, right? Well, wrong. The human eye can only perceive a very tiny sliver of the entire electromagnetic spectrum. In fact, our physical senses, touch, taste, smell and hearing, are far inferior to those of many animals and even members of the plant and vegetable kingdom. And yet, we still rely on them and continue to believe that all you perceive with them is all there is. And this is the big problem with materialism. It doesn't allow any other possibilities. And that's why, for most people, the physical world is the only world. But this physical world represents only a tiny fragment of a much wider reality, most of which is invisible and imperceptible to us. So let's explore the alternatives to materialism. Down the ages, the wise and enlightened ones have assured us that the physical world isn't the only reality. In fact, many have described it as completely illusory. Many healers and even some mainstream doctors are aware that human beings have networks of energy flowing through them. For example, traditional Chinese medicine uses these meridians for acupuncture. Most people can't see these energies, but some sensitive people are able to perceive them as different coloured auras emanating from the body. Next to the physical plane, and acting as a mirror to everything in it, is a subtler non-material world. This is usually referred to as the astral realm. Astral means star-like, because everything in the astral world is far less solid and seems to shimmer like water. The astral world is a template for the physical. It contains the non-physical blueprints for everything in the material world. So every physical thing has its astral counterpart. This is a plane of existence largely driven by emotion. It's sometimes known as the desire world, and we're no strangers to it. After all, we visit this astral realm every night when we sleep. It's where our dreams take place. And it's our immediate destination after we die. Alongside human beings, the astral world is home to many other entities too. Dead animals, elemental spirits, and even thought forms created by our emotions. Everything in the physical world actually begins on an even higher plane than that, the world of mind, the mental plane, the home of consciousness. It's formed into a blueprint on the astral before becoming material in the physical world. Even some scientists now agree with the mystics that physical objects consist of consciousness stepped down into a very much coarser state. And above the mental world are even higher levels of reality, the spiritual planes. We all have potential access to these elevated states. Most people, however, are unaware of their existence. So, we don't know who we are. We're aware of mainly the physical and not the hidden elements. Some scientists view us merely as intelligent apes or biological computers. Scientists can't measure or test the human spirit in the laboratory, and so they deny it exists. Human beings are much, much more than most people realize. Few appreciate that human potential is limitless. The only constraint is our own imaginations. Many religions don't like this idea at all. Despite what the transhumanists and the priests of artificial intelligence tell us, human beings will not be enhanced by silicon chips, microcircuitry, or exotic metals being added to their bodies. We don't need technology to evolve. Indeed, technology may impede that. So, we can see human beings as having bodies and souls, or minds, bodies and spirits. Some esoteric systems feature a widely used classification which divides human beings into 7 distinct parts. Our physical bodies, consisting of trillions upon trillions of cells, is the part, of course, that we're most familiar with. Our bodies also have an invisible energizing system called the energy body, or sometimes the etheric double, and by other names too. And as I mentioned earlier, we also have an astral body. But of course, all humans have minds. How they use them varies enormously. In fact, we don't just have one mind, but we have 2, a lower mind and a higher mind. The lower mind deals with mundane, concrete thoughts and routine, everyday trivia. What shall I have for dinner? Can I pay the rent? I hate my boss. The boss is late again. It's sometimes called the monkey mind because it's not very controlled and it's always jumping around from place to place. And much of this lower mind is driven by emotion. especially our needs and our desires. But we also have higher minds, which deal with imagination and creativity, minds which invent and conceptualize, and minds which appreciate noble virtues like truth and beauty. Even higher than our two minds is an even more sophisticated principle, often known as wisdom intuition, and in most people this is mainly dormant. In its most basic form, it comes to us as hunches, as instincts, as inspiration or flashes of insight. When more developed, the wisdom intuition principle allows us to access higher knowledge and information via a channel which transcends the intellect. An important thing to remember is that much of this hidden knowledge doesn't lie concealed out there somewhere. It lies buried deep within each of us. We know far more than we realize. We need to look inward, but accessing this faculty requires effort. And above wisdom intuition is our crowning glory, our pure spirit, part of that same universal spirit which encompasses everything in the cosmos. So we can regard ourselves as sevenfold beings. However, some of these bodies are temporary and some are permanent. The lower four bodies, the physical, the energetic, the astral and the lower mental, form the personality or lower self. This is the physical, emotional and mental makeup we adopt for one life only. The three higher bodies, higher mind, wisdom intuition and spirit, form the individuality or higher self. This is permanent, our souls if you like, and this is transferred from one life to another in modified form. Often the lower self or personality with all its drives, desires and demands is completely at odds with the wishes of the higher self or individuality, with its conflicting agenda of duty, harmony and selflessness. The two selves are frequently at war with one another. One of the core ideas of the esoteric teachings is that of cycles. Nothing at all is permanent. Nothing stays the same for the tiniest fraction of a second. Everything is in a constant state of flux. This is cyclic evolution, a series of spirals helping us to progress to more advanced states. Everything from a subatomic particle to a cluster of galaxies, and from a bacterium to a dog, has its own life cycle. Some last for nanoseconds, others last for trillions of years. Every hour, millions of cells in our own bodies die, and millions more are born. This is their life cycle. Every cycle, long or short, has exactly the same characteristics, be it a human being, a hummingbird, or a hyacinth. It's born into physical form. Over a period of time, it grows and develops. Eventually, it reaches maturity. Then, after a period of decline and decay, it reaches the end of its current cycle. The physical form dies. The essence of the human being, the hummingbird or the hyacinth are preserved on the inner planes, and ultimately they're reborn again to begin and complete the cycle once more. Everything proceeds in cycles. The seasons of the year, the phases of the moon, and sunspot activity, for example. There are times of peace and times of plenty, of famine and war, and of ages of enlightenment and of ignorance. Weather, politics, stock markets, and fashion all follow cycles. Empires, civilizations, dynasties, countries, religions, and cities all rise and fall. They reach a peak of sophistication, advancement, and sometimes high culture. And then, for various reasons, they collapse, disintegrate, and disappear, sometimes very swiftly. Nothing escapes the cyclic spiral. And cycles also show us how terms like life and death are purely relative. Death is many people's greatest fear. It shouldn't be, but it is because they misunderstand it. Ideas about death entertained by many people aren't just a cruel and pernicious myth, they're an outright lie. Some religious people firmly believe that they'll wind up in some kind of celestial paradise where they'll while away eternity with angels, with virgins, or with Jesus. The more materialistic are convinced that death of the physical body spells annihilation and the obliteration of all life and consciousness. Only total oblivion awaits. And this is where a lot of the fear comes in, because no one likes the idea of oblivion. And yet, throughout history, numerous cultures and some religions have firmly promoted the idea of something surviving death and being reborn in a new body. Even Christianity preached reincarnation at one time, but for sordid and complex reasons they banned it as a doctrine 1500 years ago. Today, in the West, reincarnation is making a comeback. Recent surveys in Europe and America indicate that between a quarter and a third of people, many of them Christians, believe they have lived before and will live again. Some are clearly unhappy with the idea of sitting out eternity in one of heaven's waiting rooms. Had we asked the reincarnation question a generation or two ago, the numbers believing in rebirth would have been negligible. The ancient teachings explain how human beings evolved slowly through the lower kingdoms of nature, the animal, the plant, and the vegetable kingdoms. Yes, even through the mineral kingdom too. These views about human evolution part company with Darwin's views. Essentially, human beings are on an eternal evolutionary journey of discovery, hopefully progressing up the scale with each life, but not always. This is why we need to be constantly reborn in new bodies, with new personalities, in different places and in different epochs, so that we can experience life in all its magnificence and all its misery. We're born rich or poor, obscure or influential, as men or as women, to suit the needs of each incarnation. One life simply isn't enough to achieve this. Humans are playing the long game. So who or what determines when, where, and how will be reborn? This is extremely complicated and deeply esoteric. The simple answer is, who decides? We do. As eternal evolving entities, we're in charge of our own destinies. No one else's. We rise or fall through our own efforts. I imagine that God's far too busy with loftier things than to worry about individual human lives. One of the key cosmic laws, perhaps the most important of all, is the law of karma, or cause and effect. This law of laws, as it's known, is what shapes each of our lives. Everything we do, say, feel, or even think leaves an imprint on the inner worlds. Nothing is immune from this indelible law. The purpose of the law of karma is about maintaining balance and harmony in the universe. It's not there to crush or punish or reward, although sometimes it appears that way. It ensures that we eventually learn from and benefit from our mistakes. We start to appreciate that much of what we're doing now in this life is effectively shaping the next one, just as this life is a product of previous ones. It means that if we choose, we can take control of our own futures. After all, we have a degree of free will. But everything has karma: rocks, universes, animals, and civilizations. Karma means that virtually nothing we encounter in life, opportunities, crises, and surprises, are random, accidental, or coincidental. They happen for a reason, and that reason is usually the result of cause and effect. We might not remember our past lives, and most people can't, but we still wrote the script for this one. At this stage of human development, it's only possible to very lightly probe the mysteries of life. Our knowledge of hidden worlds and concealed dimensions is extremely limited. But it's still vital to begin asking those big existential questions. Who am I? Where did I come from? Why am I here? Where am I going? Despite the prevailing view on this planet at this time, the world and the wider universe isn't random, accidental, or purposeless. Whoever drew up the blueprints knew what they were doing, and it wasn't a product of chance, but intention. But whose intention? God? The great architect? A universal consciousness? The all? Someone else? As the physicist Albert Einstein put it, God doesn't play dice. Whether we accept it or not, there is a grand plan, an evolutionary scheme of things. As part of that plan, humans are evolving through long cycles of development in 7 main stages. We're currently more than halfway through the 5th stage or cycle, so we've come a long way. Physically, mentally, and emotionally, we bear little resemblance to our ancient ancestors. And when humans eventually complete all 7 of those stages, far in the future, there will be nothing like we are now. Between now and that far-off horizon, there will be many more conflicts and convulsions. Civilizations and even continents will rise and fall. New ideas and human groupings will form. Creativity and destruction will exist woven together in the same double helix, because nothing remains still, even for a moment. Slowly, the cyclic spirals progressively ascend into realms beyond anything we can possibly imagine, because the plan rolls on.